Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinath Shri Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Shatar Shri Srimad Istvangre Sabaichanaravindra Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Shatar Shri Srimad Istvangre Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Janitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 7, Further Inquiries by Vidura, Text 34. Danasya tapaso vapi Danasya tapaso vapi Yachcheshtha purtayo phalam Yachcheshtha purtayo phalam Pravasastasya yodharmo Pravasastasya yodharmo Yascha pumsa utapadi Yascha pumsa utapadi Danasya tapaso vapi Yachcheshta purtayo phalam Pravasastasya yodharmo Yascha pumsa utapadi Danasya tapaso vapi Yachcheshta purtayo phalam pravasastasya yo dharmo yashcha pumsa utapadi Chishta purtayo phalam pravasastasya yo dharmo yashcha pumsa utapadi danasya tapaso vapi chishta purtayo phalam sastasya yo dharmo yashcha pumsa utapadi. Danasya of charity, tapasaha of penance, vapi lake, yat that which, cha and, ishtha endeavor, purtayoho of reservoirs of water, phalam fruitive result, pravasastasya one who is away from home, yaha that which, dharmaha duty, yahacha and which, pumsaha of man, uta described, apadi in danger. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. Please also describe the fruitive results of charity and penance and of digging reservoirs of water. Please describe the situation of persons who are away from home and also the duty of a man in an awkward position. Purport. The digging of reservoirs of water for public use is a great work of charity, and retiring from family life after 50 years of age is a great act of penance performed by the sober human being. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadam Yam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagan Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapte Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrindam. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in yesterday's class, which Ishwaresha Prabhu was giving, Prabhu raised, at the beginning of his class, he raised a very significant, seemingly a trivial point, but it's a very significant point. He was explaining that when Vidura is questioning Maitreya Muni, his questions are so in-depth and so much in detail, to the extent that it seems like Vidura already knows the answers to his questions. right? He's asking the questions in such great detail that it already seems that he already knows the answer to these questions. So this is one of the dynamics of interaction between devotees. Devotees may already know the Krishna conscious philosophy, they may already know the answers to their questions. Still, for the sake of setting an example for other persons, or simply for the sake of relishing Krishna Katha, they nevertheless talk. I think it was last week when I was saying that when someone asks a question, it signifies that they're in a lower position, in the sense that they have less knowledge than the person that they're inquiring from. But here's a different way of looking at it, that when devotees are inquiring and answering, Guyam Akiti Prachiti, they may already know the Krishna conscious philosophy and they may already know the answers which are going to come, but nevertheless they ask. Srila Prabhupada in the, I think it's the 10.9 in Bhagavad Gita, Matchita Matgata Prana Bodhayantas Parasparam Katayantascha Mamityam Tushyanti Cha Ramanti Cha. In that purport towards the end, Srila Prabhupada explains that just as a young boy and a young girl, they meet together, not for any particular reason, except for the fact that they just want to come together just to relish each other's association. They want to hear each other's voice. They want to see each other. There's no real significant reason for them to come together except to just be in each other's company. Just the small things that matters. So similarly, devotees, for no apparent reason, they'll come together and they'll start to discuss Krishna Katha. And we see this not only being displayed here, we see it later on in Srimad Bhagavatam, when Shukadeva Goswami is speaking the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. There you'll see that Parikshit Maharaj, he asks a question as to the intimate pastimes between Krishna and the gopis, how it actually seems like it's a material activity. And there in the purports it's explained that Parikshit Maharaj actually already knew the answer to the question, but he looked around the audience and he saw that there's other people in the audience who are not bhakti yogis, who are not fully in Krishna consciousness. They're jnanis, or they may have some karmic tendencies. So for the sake of setting an example for them, he asked this question, at the risk of being chastised by his guru. We see in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya, the absolute truth, he's the summum bonum, in the sense that he knows all knowledge, he's all fully cognizant, he's a Paramatma inside all of our hearts. Yet, he relishes hearing Krishna Katha from his devotees. For example, Haridas Thakur, right? When Haridas Thakur and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were speaking, from there came Harinam Chintamani, the glorious book discussing the glories of the holy name. And then we hear, recently we've been, someone was speaking about Raya Ramananda Samvad, Katha. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai are discussing. That's in CC class, isn't it? We're discussing that, yeah. So again, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he already knows the topmost form of devotional service. Still, he relishes hearing the answer from his devotees. And one more example which can be given is from the Uddhava Gita. It's said that Uddhava Gita is an extension to the Bhagavad Gita. Whereas in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about different types of yoga systems. He starts off by talking about Karma Yoga, then he talks about Jnana Yoga, then he talks about Ashtanga Yoga in the 6th chapter, Dhyana Yoga. And then finally, the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, they talk about Bhakti. Right? Now, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has already established devotion to him as the topmost form of self-realization, of spirituality. Therefore, in Uddhava Gita, Krishna doesn't bother talking about Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Ashtanga Yoga. Rather, he talks about these 3 categories within Bhakti. So, when Uddhava is inquiring to Krishna about Krishna consciousness, the answers that Krishna gives, first of all, I think this is in one particular chapter, Krishna outlines bhakti, which is mixed with karma, karma mishra bhakti, bhakti which is mixed with gyan, gyan mishra bhakti, and bhakti which is mixed with yoga, yoga mishra bhakti. And he explains these three different types of bhakti, which is not unalloyed but alloyed with karma, gyan, and yoga, for those devotees who are not yet fully purified and they cannot practice bhakti in of itself, complete devotion to Krishna in of itself. After Krishna has explained these three types of bhakti, then Krishna explains pure bhakti to Uddhava. After explaining about pure bhakti, Uddhava, out of his great humility, poses a question, or rather he submits his difficulty in understanding Krishna's answers. He says that, Krishna, I still have a doubt in my mind. Just like Arjuna had a doubt at the beginning of the 3rd chapter, similarly, Uddhava also has a doubt. He says, Krishna, you've outlined performing bhakti tinged with fruitive mentality. You've outlined bhakti tinged with the desire to acquire transcendental knowledge just for the sake of it. And you've outlined bhakti in terms of meditation, in terms of meditating, closing our eyes and meditating on the form of the Lord. And then you're saying, but not to worry about all these and just focus on celebrating Janmashtami, focus on coming together and building temples for you and discussing your glory. So I'm confused. What type of devotional service are you actually recommending to me? And there we see that Krishna actually gets surprised. Why? Because Uddhava is initially asking these questions not for himself, but for other people, for the sake of other people, as I was mentioning before. Uddhava is one of Krishna's principal devotees in Dwarka. He's so much Krishna conscious that his own bodily complexion and stature represents Krishna himself. We see that sometimes, right? Like I think even either Pradyumna or Aniruddha, I think it's Pradyumna, Krishna's first son with Queen Rukmini. He also resembles exactly in physical appearance, just like Krishna, because he's so Krishna conscious. He's so absorbed in Krishna's thoughts that his body becomes like that. Just like there's a verse in the 11th canto, also the Bhagavatam, where it says that when a small insect, it's stuck in or a spider, I can't remember. Anyway, it's stuck and a wasp, its captor is there. Then the small insect knows that it's going to die very soon. So what does the small insect do? It starts, in fear, it starts to meditate on its captor. Although the wasp is going to come, anytime now the wasp is going to come and it's going to eat me alive. And it's explained in Srimad Bhagavatam that that intense meditation on the wasp means that that insect who is in fear meditating on that wasp starts to develop the qualities of that wasp as well, so that in its future lifetime it also takes on the body of the wasp. So whether we, just like Ganashampu was mentioning yesterday, that attraction and aversion is two sides of the same coin. Whether you hate a person, whether you like a person, your mind will naturally just gravitate towards that person, whether you hate them or whether you like them. So in the same way, whether you're afraid of a person and as a result you're meditating on them, or whether you're disliking a person, or whether you're attracted to a person, you will helplessly meditate on that person. And Srimad Bhagavatam explains, you will develop the qualities of that person and you'll take a similar body in the next lifetime. And there in the purports it's explained that iha yasya haredasya karmana manasagira nikhilasvapi avastasu jivan mukta suchate. So the example is given that even in the present lifetime, a devotee through his constant meditation on Krishna can become fully liberated by his favorable meditation on Krishna. Conversely, in juxtaposition, it's explained that if a person develops or is completely covered up by the mode of ignorance, then he or she, even though they're in a human form of life, will act just like an animal, like a dog or a cat, by pursuing a really sinful lifetime. So even within our present body, we can either be fully liberated, just like a spiritual resident of the spiritual world, or we can act like an animal, even though we have a human body. So that's within the present lifetime, if we just mentally focus and concentrate on such qualities. So Uddhava, being a pure devotee, is asking these questions for the others, not for himself. But Krishna gets but Krishna gets surprised as to why Uddhava is having doubts. Why is Uddhava saying to me, is asking me, Krishna, why do you want me to, I'm confused. You're talking about Karma Mishra Bhakti, Yoga Mishra Bhakti, Gyan Mishra Bhakti, and then you're talking about pure devotion. What type of devotion do you want me to follow? Uddhava is already following the path of pure devotion, but out of his humility is asking Krishna, what type of bhakti do you want me to follow? So we can see there, Uddhava is showing a perfect example where he himself knows what is pure devotion, but for the sake of it, he's asking these questions to Krishna. And in that sense, he's getting answers. Now, in the same light, Vidura is also inquiring from his guru, Maitreya Muni. And in today's verse, Vidura is inquiring about fruitive results of charity and penance, dhanasya and tapas. And he's also talking about acts of community welfare, such as digging reservoirs of water. And Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, the digging of reservoirs of water for public use is a great work of charity. Now, if you remember in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there Arjuna is presenting reasons, very logical, systematic reasons to Krishna as to why he doesn't want to fight the battle. And he says, Utsana kula dharmanam manushanam janardana narake niyatam vaso bhavatiti anashushrama. Right? And then the verse before that, specifically relating to this, he says, Dosher ete kulagnanam varna sankara karakai utsadyante jati dharmas kula dharmasya shashvata. So what does that mean? It says that those who are against family traditions, because they're Varna Sankara. They've grown up in a family and in a society, in a culture where there's no family tradition because of unrestricted mixing between the two sexes. So this sort of Varna Sankara, they become very hellish sort of people because they stop family traditions. Bhagavad Gita explains they lupta pindo dakakriya. They stop performing the pinda ceremony. And in that way, the forefathers, they suffer, and their present family members, they also suffer as well. So such people, Arjuna explains, dosher ete kulagnanam varna sankara karakai utsadyante jati dharmas kula dharmasya shashvata. He says such people stop not only family tradition, but they also stop community welfare projects. And their community welfare projects is mentioned like things like here, like Srila Prabhupada is saying, digging reservoirs of water, having wells, nice parks, nice trees, like auspicious trees, like fruit trees, like apples and orchards. I remember whenever I think of community welfare projects and these trees, I always think of the place called Orange where we went. So some of you did not go there. But last year when we were traveling on Traveling Sankirtan, we went to Orange, which is a really beautiful country town in western New South Wales. And one thing which I personally found, which was quite impressive, is that it was very different compared to all the other towns and villages which we had visited. It was a very green town. The council had planted on street corners, and this is something that I personally found out, and some of the other Prabhus who are distributing books, they noticed this, but the local residents somehow, when I was asking them, they didn't notice this. But you would find every now and again, apple trees lining the side of the road. You will find orange trees, you will find fig trees lining the sides of the road. And it was so nice that, you're distributing books, you're going from door to door, and you'll come across an apple tree, And it's not in anyone's property, it's just there on the side of the road. And you can just pick the apples. So in this way, a couple of times I remember we did that. We picked some of the apples from the trees and we took them home. So that was very nice. They have a really nice park there as well. It's called Cook Park. So it's like a botanical sort of garden park. So really beautiful flowers, flowering plants, really nice trees as well. Oak trees, pine trees. And they have like a beautiful greenhouse as well, full of lilies and daisies and stuff like that. So you can see naturally when the government engages in community welfare projects like this, then the people in such an area are very peaceful and very happy. They naturally rise and gravitate towards the mode of goodness, which we explained is the springboard towards spiritual life. It's the airport that you have to come to in order to fly to an international destination. But Krishna consciousness is the airline which you have to board when you're at the airport to be able to actually take off, to Vishuddha Sattva, to be able to take off to actual Krishna consciousness. So this is the benefit. But one thing, I marked this actually in regards to community welfare projects. Krishna explains. Now, just now I was explaining in the Uddhava Gita about how Krishna is talking about Karma Mishra Bhakti, Gyan Mishra Bhakti, and Yoga Mishra Bhakti, and then Krishna outlines pure devotion. So this series of verses, I'm not going to read all the translation, but this is referring to pure devotion, and Krishna himself is telling Uddhava about what a devotee should do to exhibit his or her pure devotion. Krishna says, now, when you're hearing this, try to visualize Gopinath himself saying this. So Gopinath is saying, one may purify oneself by seeing, touching, worshipping, serving, and offering prayers of glorification and obeisances to my form as the deity and to my pure devotees. One should also glorify my transcendental qualities and activities. Hear with love and faith the narrations of my glories and constantly meditate upon me. One should offer me whatever one acquires, and accepting oneself as my eternal servant, one should give oneself to me completely. Here's something nice. He says, one should always discuss my birth and activities and enjoy life by participating in festivals such as Janmashtami, which glorify my pastimes. In my temple, one should also participate in festivals and ceremonies by singing, dancing, playing musical instruments, and discussing me with other Vaishnavas. Now, I'll just skip a few lines, and then Krishna goes on to say that one should observe other events like Ekadashi, other significant events and annual festivals. And then he says, one should faithfully and lovingly support the installation of my deity, and individually or in cooperation with others. So if there's no one to help you, then Krishna is saying, do it by yourself. Individually or only in cooperation with others, one should work for the construction of Krishna-conscious temples and cities, as well as flower gardens, fruit gardens, and special areas to celebrate my pastimes. And if you read the Sanskrit, it actually says Udyana. Udyana means flower gardens. So Krishna is saying that the government or whoever, maybe a rich devotee, he or she should construct flower gardens. Upavana, orchards. Should plant orchards which give beautiful, fruits, stone fruits especially, like peaches and nectarines. And then it says Akrida, which are places of pastimes. So what that translates to is actually like parks and gardens with beautiful waterfall, like fountains and all these sort of things like that. So what Krishna is saying is that, because this also falls under community welfare projects, right? But Krishna is saying, do that in conjunction with me and my service. If a government just builds community, it just focuses only on community welfare projects, then it may raise the populace to the mode of goodness, but it's not going to make people Krishna conscious necessarily. Like we have the example in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where it's talking about these subterranean hellish planets. And these are planets which have been constructed by the architect of the Daityas, the demons, known as Maya Danava. And explained that these subterranean heavenly planets are so beautiful, actually. Materially speaking, they're so beautiful in terms of architecture, in terms of all varieties of sense gratification, and they've specifically been designed like that by Maya Danava. But the people are enjoying there nicely in mature life, but the fatal thing, the flaw there, is that they're not Krishna conscious. The difference between the heavenly planets and the subterranean heavenly planets is that both are intense places of sense gratification, but in the heavenly planets, while they're engaging in sense enjoyment, they're still conscious of Krishna. They're still conscious of their subordinate position in relation to Krishna. Whereas in the subterranean hellish planets, the inhabitants are enjoying sense gratification without Krishna consciousness, without understanding Krishna. So if we just build beautiful parks and fountains and lakes and wells and hospitals without dovetailing these things in Krishna's service, that's not actually beneficial to society. So Krishna is telling Uddhava in the Uddhava Gita that you should do these things, but do them in relationship to my service, he's telling. So that's in relation to the digging of wells and all that sort of stuff. So then Krishna is talking, or rather Vidur is asking about, please also describe the fruitive results of charity and penance. So in the fifth verse of the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling to Arjuna that even if one is a very advanced practitioner of Krishna consciousness or in any other spiritual field, like if one is advanced spiritually, one should never give up yajna, dan and tapa. Sacrifice, charity and austerity, Krishna tells Arjuna, these three things one should never give up. Why? Because they purify even the great souls. It's explained. And Srila Prabhupada in his purport there, he sort of subliminally refers to himself in relation to the Vivaha Yajna, which is the marriage sacrifice. He explains that it may seem to some people that those who are in the renounced order of life, particularly sannyasis, and he's referring to himself, he asks in the purport, he asks, why is it that a sannyasi should have anything to do with the Vivaha Yajna, with the marriage yajna? Because the sannyasi has given up, he's severed the ties to his family relations and all these other things, materialistic things. So why should a sannyasi get involved with performing the Vivaha Yajna? But Srila Prabhupada justifies himself in the sense that Srila Prabhupada himself oversaw and conducted the Vivaha Yajna for his disciples. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport, if you read it, he justifies his act of doing that by that particular verse in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that even if one is a great soul, right now in society a sannyasi is considered to be a great soul, a Mahatma, compared to the rest of the people in the rest of the ashramas, right? The sannyasi is the crest jewel, is supposed to enlighten people in Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada says that even these three things, they must be continued because they purify even the great souls. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada, even though he's taken the sannyasa ashram, he still uses this verse to justify him performing the Vivaha Yajna for his disciples. Now that doesn't mean that Srila Prabhupada or any other sannyasi should just randomly go out and make a business of performing marriage ceremonies. No, he did that only in relation to his disciples, for the sake of them coming together as husband and wife, so that they could prosecute Krishna consciousness perfectly. So he did that for a Krishna conscious cause, right? So we can see from Srila Prabhupada's example also that even if one has taken sannyas, one is a parivrajikacharya, one is a paramahamsa, still one should not give up yajna, dan and tapa. And these things are described in the Bhagavad Gita in the 17th chapter. I thought we could just go through them really quickly. Specifically when it comes to tapasya, because here it's saying danasya and tapasya. It's not really talking so much about yagya or sacrifice, this verse, but Vidura is inquiring to Maitreya about dan, charity, and tapa, austerity. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, 17th chapter, Krishna defines, first of all, what austerity is. He says austerity falls in 3 categories. Austerity has to do with your body, it has to do with your words, and it has to do with your mind. After defining austerity as having these 3 components, then Krishna goes on to define austerity within the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Similarly, he defines charity in the 3 modes as well. Krishna tells to Arjuna, this is text 14 in the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, austerity of the body consists of worshipping the Supreme Lord, the Brahmanas, the spiritual master, and superiors like the father, mother, as well as cleanliness of the body, external and internal cleanliness of the body, simplicity, which means non-duplicity. A devotee should be non-duplicitous. That means his outward behavior, external behavior, should resonate exactly with his internal behavior as well. Celibacy is another austerity of the body, and non-violence. But in relation to Brahmanas, spiritual master, and superiors, we can see Arjuna has demonstrated that at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Guru nahatva hi maha anubhavam, shreyo bhoktum bhaiksham apiya loke. He says, it is far better to live by begging than fighting with elders like Bhishma and my martial guru, Dronacharya. I do not want to have my hands tainted with their blood. Katam Bhishma maham sankhe dronam cha madhusudana. Ishubi paryatyami pujarhav arisudana. He tells to, Arjuna tells to Krishna, how can I fight with Bhishma and Drona? Pujarhav arisudana. Arisudana, they are worthy of my worship, of my puja. So we can see that even though they've done wrong, still Arjuna is demonstrating great respect towards them. This is austerity of the body. Arjuna is still showing respect to his enemies in the midst of battle. Then Krishna explains, austerity of the speech consists of speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, and beneficial. Satyam priyam hitam chayat. And not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. So Srila Prabhupada says that one should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others. My Guru Maharaj explains sometimes in lectures, he says, giving Krishna consciousness to other people is good, but we have to give it to others in a proper way, in a way that they can digest it. Otherwise it may turn them away from Krishna consciousness. And further it's explained, Satyam Priyam Hitam, pleasing, beneficial, and truthful. If at all you have to sacrifice something, you can sacrifice the beneficial and the pleasing, but you have to speak at least the truth to the other person. And then he says, and satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of one's existence are austerities of the mind. Satisfaction of the mind, simplicity of the mind, gravity. Gravity means the mind should be focused only on one thing, and that one thing is Krishna consciousness. Self-control of the mind and purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. Now, one thing that can be said, I read something interesting recently. The gopis in Vrindavan, they were focused only on Krishna. So one may say that since they were focusing only on Krishna, they were missing out on thinking of other things. Just like in the material world, if we're intensely meditating on one thing, it naturally means that we are ignorant of other things which we are not thinking of. Right? If I'm just, if I'm just studying, let's say if I'm a student at university, and I'm studying, I'm just focusing on studies, that's it, whatever my subject is, then it may be said that I'm lacking knowledge or I'm ignorant of everything else which is happening in the world. Right? So I'm in knowledge of what I'm studying, but I'm in ignorance of everything else. But because, the Acharyas explain, because Krishna is the source of all existence, right? What's that verse? Yasmin vigyate sarvam evam vigyate bhavantu. Right? If one knows Krishna, one knows everything. So because the whole material world is coming from Krishna, the whole spiritual world is Krishna's energy. Everything is within the body of Krishna. Right? When Krishna was showing, when he was opening his mouth and Mother Yashoda looked into it, within his body, Mother Yashoda saw everything. The entire manifestation, mature manifestation, all the galaxies, all the planets, everything she saw, including herself. So everything is within the body of Krishna. So therefore, when Krishna's intimate devotees, like the gopis, when they meditate exclusively on Krishna, they're actually not in ignorance of anything. They're not missing out on anything. And that's a very important lesson for us as devotees. Sometimes we also may feel that, yeah, I'm practicing Krishna consciousness, I'm focusing on the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, but I need to be aware of what's happening in the world. I remember Kadambakana Maharshi said something very profound, very simple but very profound. He says, if news is that important, then it will come to you. You don't have to go looking outside for news. If news is really that important, then somehow or other it will come to you from somewhere. It will reach your ears. Some other devotee might tell you some, you might be walking somewhere and you might see some billboard somewhere. Just, it may come to you. It may just happen to come to you. If it's really that important, you'll come to hear it. You don't have to go out of your way to keep a track of what's going on. As devotees, we should be focusing, endeavoring to focus simply on Krishna, specifically Krishna's body. And the Acharyas explained that it is a symptom of pure love. It is a symptom of pure love for a person to think exclusively of the lover and nothing else. So in this way, the gopis were practicing the austerity of the mind. Actually, for them, it was not an austerity, but it was the greatest bliss. But for us, as conditioned souls, it is an austerity to fix our minds only on Krishna, because our mind wants to think of sense gratification and so many other things. And here's another interesting point. It's mentioned, it was mentioned when I was reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that the gopis are considered to be the most attractive girls in all of creation. But ordinarily speaking, we are very conscious of our body, right? But it's explained that for the gopis, their body was far distant from them, right? Our greatest possession, our closest possession to us is our own body, right? We're always looking at our body, we're feeling our body, we're taking nice care of our body, we're feeding our body, we're resting our body. Our body is our closest possession. But Srimad Bhagavatam explains that for the gopis, their body was far distant from them. It was not their closest possession. They were thinking more about Krishna's body than their own body. So that's another lesson that we can take as devotees, that slowly, because this material body is not us, it's not our actual identity. So we should gradually practice Krishna consciousness in such a way that we stop thinking and being conscious of our body. Right? And Vedic culture is geared towards that. For example, one should not look at one's naked body. So Vedic culture says, whenever one is appearing in public or whenever one is taking a shower or whatever, then one should cover up oneself. Especially one's private parts, one should cover up with a gamcha. Right? We should not excessively look at mirrors and decorate our body in nice ways. This just makes us bodily conscious. And we'll end up taking another material body in our next life. So just as for the gopis, they were not at all conscious of their body, even though they were the most beautiful girls in all of creation, they were not conscious of their body. Similarly, we should also endeavor to stop being conscious of our body. Everything was happening for them. Krishna was taking care. Just like the same thing with Prahlad Maharaj as well. And Krishna mentions the same thing in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as well. Prahlad Maharaj, he didn't know how all these activities, how all these bodily functions were happening. He was just focused on Vishnu, on Narayan, on Lord Nrsimhadev. Just focused, fixed in thought. And all these bodily activities, apparently necessary bodily activities like eating, sleeping, evacuating, all these things were just happening without him actually even being conscious of them. So this is a stage of perfection that we should try to come to. Right? So that's regarding austerity. And then Krishna talks about austerity, tapasya in the three modes. And then he talks about charity. He says, charity which is given out of duty, without expectation of return, at the proper time and place, and to a worthy person, is considered to be in the mode of goodness. So essentially, the way Krishna is differentiating goodness, passion, ignorance, he's saying charity, austerity, and sacrifice is in the mode of goodness, means you're just doing it out of duty without attachment to the results. Charity, austerity, and sacrifice performed in the mode of passion means you're doing it expecting a result. And charity, austerity, and penance performed in the mode of ignorance, Krishna is saying, you're doing it in a speculative way, not in accordance with any shastric injunction. You're giving things to an inappropriate person, like that. Basically, you're not doing it according to Shastra, but you're just doing it however you want to do it, like that. So that's charity in the mode of goodness. Then he says, but charity performed, again, with the expectation of some return. Same thing with austerity. Austerity, Krishna says, that if you perform it with pride, wanting some recognition, that's also austerity performed in the mode of passion. Charity performed with the expectation of some return, or with a desire for fruitive results, or in a grudging mood to give charity to someone and you actually don't want to give charity to someone, is said to be charity in the mode of passion. And charity performed at an impure place, at an improper time, to unworthy persons, without proper attention and respect, is said to be in the mode of ignorance. So particularly when it says unworthy person, sometimes you'll see, many times on book distribution, you'll come across people who come up to you and they'll say, please, give me some spare change. I want to buy a packet of smokes, or please give me some spare change. I want to buy, a bottle of beer or something like that. So this is an example of giving charity in ignorance to an unworthy person. Now a devotee doesn't just, brush them aside. Rather, the devotee gives charity even to such persons, but a devotee gives Krishna conscious charity. The devotee would not give, alcohol or something like that. But if a beggar on the street is after food, then the devotee should give some prasad. Right? I remember when we were doing Harinam, sometimes, some years back, we used to take some prasad with us from Gopinath's ashram in the city. We'd have some boxes left over. So after the Harinam finished at 8 o'clock or 8:30, then we'd run around town hall and we would find all the homeless people and we'd give them some prasad. And they would already have their big boxes of KFC and all these other things. Still sometimes they would accept, sometimes they wouldn't. They say, I don't want any rice and curry, I already have this KFC, this box of KFC. So unfortunately that is the situation in Kali Yuga. I just want to finish with a couple of stories, because when a devotee practices a devotional service and performs charity, austerity, and tapasya, then a devotee becomes very dear to Krishna. And a devotee gets all the mystic siddhis. We see Leela Shuk, we see Bilva Mangal Thakur, he explains that liberation personified, Mukti Mukulitanjali Sevatiya Asman. He says that liberation personified comes with folded hands and offers obeisances to the devotee, ready to give the devotee any mystic power, any type of liberation the devotee deserves. So when a devotee actually becomes so detached to sense gratification, not just physical sense gratification, but also in the mind, more importantly in the mind, when the devotee becomes so detached and averse to pride, labh, puja, pratishta, right? We were talking about these three things in the Vaishnava K seminar, labh, puja, pratishta, and all these things. When a devotee becomes so detached and disgusted by these things, at that moment, Krishna may bestow upon the devotee all sorts of mystic siddhis. So the devotee can use these in Krishna consciousness. The example given is Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj was not immediately given material opulence and a big kingdom, but when Dhruva Maharaj came to the point of realizing that the kingdom I was desiring is actually just like a broken piece of glass. At that time, Krishna gave him a kingdom, a material kingdom. Now you're qualified. Because now, even if I give you such a big kingdom, you won't be bewildered and you won't get entangled. So a devotee develops this siddhi known as kamavashayita, which means that devotee can obtain whatever he or she desires for the service of Krishna. So this is sometimes displayed by yogis. There's a story both in Srila Prabhupada's pastimes and in the pastimes of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, where it's explained that once Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was traveling in a train with one of his disciples. And this disciple, he was a very new devotee, and the train journey was very long, it was very arduous. So the disciple asked his spiritual master, he asked Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Guru Maharaj, can we please get something to eat? I really desire to get some halwa. So it's explained that both Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and his disciple, at a particular train stop, they got out and they started searching for some vendors who were selling some halwa, but they couldn't find. So what happened? They couldn't find. They got back on the train, and the train started to move, and it came to another stop again. They looked around, nothing was there. And then they came and sat down on the train again, and just opposite to them was a yogi sitting. And the yogi said, he spoke to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he said, dear Guruji, dear respected sannyasi, it appears that your disciple wants something to eat, something to eat. And the disciple says, yes, I want some halwa, but we can't find any halwa anywhere. So as it's recounted, this yogi, while sitting in the train, he put his hand outside the train carriage and put his hand back inside, and in his hand was a hot plate of halwa. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said to his disciple, just see, Krishna is very kind to you. He has fulfilled your desire. Now, we should not think that the devotee is unqualified to be able to do that. Rather, we should see it that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur arranged for his disciple to get this in this way. Another example is Srila Prabhupada. When Srila Prabhupada was a young boy, at that time many yogis and many spiritual people, sannyasis, they would frequent the house of his father. And as is the custom of grihastha, at least back in those times, every evening they would invite saintly people to their house, and they would be fed prasad, and that way they would give blessings to the householders. So once upon a time, when Abhay Charan was very small, then his father had invited some people, and they happened to be yogis. Again, we're giving examples of yogis because they are said to possess this kama vashayitva siddhi, right? Whatever they can desire. Of course, as I'm going to explain, that a devotee also possesses this as well. But in this particular example, the yogi was there sitting in the courtyard of Srila Prabhupada's house, Abhay Charan's house, and he asked little Abhay Charan, he said, so please tell me, what is the favorite thing that you like to eat? And little Abhay said, I like fruits. Please give me some fruits. I'd like some fruits. And the yogi said, so what type of fruits do you like? Tell me some exotic fruits that you like. And Abhay said, I really like these rare pomegranates.